I'm here today with journalist and technology critic Maggie Jackson. I've interviewed her several times in previous lifetimes about other books she's written. Most recently, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 years ago, was Distracted, Reclaiming Our Focus in a World of Lost Attention. That was when I was in this really deep attention span type of mode, and she's got some incredible thinking on that. And I highly recommend the book Distracted. Please check it out on Amazon. Amazon. She's currently writing a book about uncertainty and uncertainty's role in good thinking. And what brought Maggie and I back together again after all this time was a recent article she wrote for the Boston Globe, and it was entitled The Gift of Being Unsure of What to Do. Subtitled, In Times of Flux, Embracing Uncertainty and Ambiguity Sharpens Your Thinking. Maggie, this thing is going viral. Everybody's talking about this article. I see it pop up here and there all the time. I really admire your approach to it, and it's so refreshing to hear this sort of mode of thinking on it. We all get so caught up on being so damn sure of everything and afraid of making the wrong decisions or not having the facts quickly or whatever. Anyway, hello. So good to see
Hi.
you again. Hi.
Yeah, no, and I heartily agree with everything you said. Yeah, we come in, we're steeped in this culture of, ultra efficiency and not pausing one iota, and then fear of uncertainty,
Sure.
fear of what we don't know.
Let's just jump in, and I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty rounded conversation. We'll go back and forth on a couple of things here. Why should anybody be uncertain about anything these days? Because we have these, and I can just, there are facts there, and this makes me so much smarter. You know what I mean? Um, I guess I want to jump into why. I guess uncertainty is a human condition. You know what I mean? And we will be that way about everything. But what's brought it to a head in your mind recently, where it really has become this sort of show-stopping issue?
Right, exactly. Well, that you already raised many great questions. And I think that the reason why uncertainty is on so many people's minds and uncertainty is in the headlines all the time, and even some studies show that there is more uncertainty by multiple measures. It's because we do have this highly interconnected, globalized, and, if you will, fragile world in which a tweak here of the airplane schedule or a virus there in China, riffles through our culture, our society, our health and welfare. And so we are all so interconnected that there is in less sort of predictability.
Hmm.
The changes are quick. The disasters are more extreme,
Hmm.
both in terms of climate and, again, in terms of finance, et cetera. And so there is just more uncertainty. I mean, if you can go back to the Middle Ages or go back to the ancient times, of course, humanity has always dealt with not knowing.
Hmm.
And so that's really part of the human condition. And in fact, I think we should, in some ways, stop a moment to define uncertainty. I've been talking about some big global issues related to uncertainty, but what I'm interested in at the moment is our uncertainty, our psychological uncertainty. Generally, there are thought to be two types of uncertainty. One would be what's out there. We can't tell the weather, except through the weather report. We can't really tell quite what the stock market is going to do, et cetera, et cetera. But our uncertainty is our reaction to incomplete knowledge, to unpredictability. And so a lot of people might argue that the lines between those are pretty blurry because it all boils down to what we know or don't know, what we as humans, that's our vision of the world.
Hmm.
So, and yet at the same time, what's really interesting is that so often and predominantly people do talk about the uncertainty. Uncertainty is something out there, something that can be tackled with probability and statistical elements, et cetera. That's how, the Western world or modern humanity has dealt with these unknowns. But now the idea of our uncertainty, how little you know, when you're unsure, when you're in doubt about the new client or what product to choose, or the state of your child's health, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all topics that are now gaining incredible scientific attention. It's hard to believe, but psychological uncertainty has been not really getting very much attention in terms of unpacking its mechanisms and understanding how it works and understanding how we can actually train it. So we're getting to the point now, and that's where that's what's the centerpiece of my article, that we can not just understand our uncertainty, but also basically become more skillful at dealing with the unknown, our unknowns, etc.
Okay.
I hope that sort of puts this a little bit, clarifies.
I think that grounds us in kind of some humanistic definitions and understandings of something that we have a great deal of trouble understanding at all.
Right. It's
all right.
really quite simple.
Let's go down the science path a little bit, and what is the evolving sort of science of uncertainty? What can you share with us about people you've talked to in this space?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, first of all, I was thinking I was going to write a book about thinking, and what are the great skill sets for thinking well, thinking more slowly, thinking more deliberately in this age. And then the first chapter of this book of mine was going to be about uncertainty, and I sort of came to a careening halt and realized that this merited an entire book, partly because there had just been so much scientific investigation of this topic now. Uncertainty, just to put it briefly again, is the awareness of the incompleteness of your knowledge. So it's being aware that you're not understanding something, or that you aren't sure, or things look fuzzy, etc. And now scientists are beginning to understand, the kind of cognitive mechanisms related to that. Now, one of the most important points is that this is a very uncomfortable state of mind for humanity. This is really not where humans want to be. They don't want to be in the middle of not knowing, or in the middle of a decision. And that's, you can see, as evolutionary biologists would emphasize, we need to resolve, where's the piece of fruit, or the deer we want to hunt, or, the shelter for the night. We need that. So we evolved to be uncomfortable at this. But the key question now is, whether or not we're going to give time and energy and focus to that state of uncertainty. Are we going to ask ourselves are we going to race to an answer in order to get rid of that discomfort, in order to get to the first answer? Or are we going to actually sit with uncertainty, investigate what it's telling us, etc.? And just one other point about that, uncertainty is a psychological clue. It's actually a signal to the human, to the animal, that there is more to know. So that it's almost like pain in your body is telling you that you may have a sprained ankle. Sure. Uncertainty in your mind is telling you that, wait a minute, maybe you're not ready to make that decision. And instead of just ignoring that and racing off to get rid of the discomfort, it's important to stick with that. And one last point is that uncertainty is actually considered a form of stress, which is very fascinating, because it has all these physiological sort of components of it that are related to stress. It goes hand in hand with stress. And as we all know by now, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Stress, aka uncertainty, can be very, very important. It basically helps us. It's the stepping stone. It invokes the higher order, deliberative, slow mind, as Daniel Kahneman focused on. So
well, I was going to actually pursue the Kahneman thing here. We had a previous conversation where we did talk a little bit about him, and you mentioned in a previous, comment that you made in your answer in your response about this this ability to slow down. Where we're in such a big hurry. Speed is a competitive advantage. Speed is an important part of combat. Speed is an important part of achievement. Speed is arguably an important part of success. But a lot of this research is telling us that's really not the case, because we can rush headlong into a completely bad decision, or even ratchet up the stress level to an even higher level. Can you talk a little bit about this ability to slow down, or how important it is to sort of examine options?
Yes, exactly. Well, uncertainty is not just, I call it the gadfly of the mind, the instigator, the provocateur, that moment of stress, but it also, in and of itself, is a slowing mechanism, again, for the human cognition, for the human as an animal. It basically, you can see, as one psychologist calls it, it's a detachment from commitment or action. In other words, the uncertainty that grips you is actually forcing you, helping you to stop and then consider your options. And that's really important. On one study that was a sort of field study of CEOs in Europe during a crisis situation in the middle of expanding the EU markets, big challenge for any European company. One study of CEOs found that, contrary to what anyone would expect, the CEOs who didn't think everything will be fine and I'm going to, operate on that condition, or did not think, oh, things are going to be really rough and I'm going to operate on that assumption. The ones who were ambivalent, the ones who were thinking, it could go this way, it could go that way, I'm not sure. Those were the CEOs longitudinally who were more resourceful, who, had invoked more, got more advice from multiple voices, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see in the space, I really love to think of uncertainty as a space. In the space, it's sort of philosophical and also psychological. In the space of our uncertainty, we gain this ability to consider options, to test and weigh the alternatives, to look at multiple perspectives, and that makes us agile.
Right. Yeah. Well, now I'm in complete agreement. I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second and say there's a lot of old school thinking. It's not just business thinking, but cultural thinking, along this whole issue of being the smartest person in the room, or having the answers right away, and if I don't have those answers, and if I have to actually say, oh my gosh, if I actually have to say I don't know, or let's take a day to think about it, you know what I mean? Let's sleep on it, or let's do some research on it. Then I could run the risk in an older thinking culture of being perceived as a weakling. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't even think it's an older culture. No, I think we're wrestling with sort of mixed minds about this notion of, we know that it's good to stop and think, but yet studies out of Columbia University show that CEOs who deliberate for just 10 seconds on a complex issue that they don't know anything about in advance, in other words, a sort of crisis situation, if they're shown on videotape deliberating for 10 seconds, they're rated as less influential and less competent. And in fact, doctors who say, I don't know, are often rated by patients as less competent. And yet, I have to reiterate that all of the science shows that attitude we have about people who are uncertain is just plain wrong. I mean, this is everything from group dynamics. If you have a group that's more challenging and questioning and has more conflict, which is all about uncertainty, they will do better and they'll rate themselves as less effective. They
Okay.
will do better. I mean, and the CEOs, and who wants an ambivalent doctor? I don't want a surgeon.
but
It
but
goes on and on.
but that's the thing, and we can get caught up in kind of the hyperbole of it. You know what I mean? Do I want an indecisive, airline pilot? You know what I mean? Do I want to? And you can play that type of game. But the fact of the matter is, and you make an argument, I believe that there's an upside to not knowing, right? I mean,
Absolutely. And
and
it's very important, though, to say flat out that our cultural values related to uncertainty are often, mistaken.
mhm.
So this is something in our individual life and our professional life, we really do have to open our minds to the values of uncertainty, and that's really, really, we can talk a little bit about that. But yes, there are so many upsides to uncertainty. I mentioned in group dynamics, groups that have more dissent and discord and diversity, whether it's visible or heard, all think that this group is more uncomfortable and there's
Yeah.
less bonding and it slows you down, but that is uncertainty right there.
Well,
And
yeah, you're exactly right. But also, we're at a moment in time, arguably a moment in history, where we could talk endlessly about uncertainty on the personal level. Oh, I'm very uncertain about this. Something just happened in my life or my family's life or something like that, and it's a personal change or challenge I'm dealing with. But now we're almost dealing with uncertainty at a societal level. You know what I mean? And whether it's COVID-19 or economic challenges or new administrations or challenging international politics, it just seems like it's not a personal thing. It's a personal thing, but it's not a personal thing. It's almost a societal thing. Do you agree?
well, I think both. And I mean, every decision that people make, whether to wear a mask, every decision they make about whether or not to invest in this or that stock, it all adds up into the great totality. There is definitely a trend now, toward fearing and not understanding uncertainty. This is why my article became viral.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this hits people at home and it hits people in our wider society. We're talking about the crumbling, in a sense, of the efficiency society, the idea that ideas are downloadable, that creativity is instant and push button. I think people all around us can begin to see that really is shattering.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of where we have invested our ideals of success are actually going off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one reason why there are so many broken systems. Those are big questions, but it does, in a way, I believe, and in all of my decades of work on very big global topics, from work-life balance to how technology fits us, it boils down to individual decision-making and how we relate to and harness the powers of uncertainty. So as I was saying, uncertainty has tremendous upsides. It's now connected to resilience and to healing and to focus and to better thinking in multiple ways. But we also have to understand that the reason it's connected to these powerful outcomes, beneficial outcomes, is because it has to do with thinking well. Now, the uncertainty that we think of as leading us to a dead end, to paralysis, to humiliation, to being seen as a loser, is actually what's going to vault you into a more reflective and better and deeper state of mind. If you skip over the uncertainty in your life, if you shun that doubt, and that, what I'm talking about now is tolerance of uncertainty, which is a kind of mindset. We have tolerance is basically a kind of mindset that we have related to whether or not we want to actually deal with that. How our approach to uncertainty is called the tolerance of uncertainty, tolerance of ambiguity, et cetera. There are lots and lots and lots of tests for that in the business world and the medical world. And that really tells us a lot about basically our personality vis-a-vis uncertainty. And it's really important to understand uncertainty. The people who deal well with this, and therefore they harness that good thinking, are ones who see it as a challenge, not a threat. Simple as that.
I can see some people saying, Maggie, you know what? I feel that technology has kind of gotten us into this hole. I feel that the internet and these iPhones I carry around with me and cable TV and satellite transmissions and all this stuff is really what has gotten me so worked up, and because, has gotten me so concerned about things. In your mind and in your experience, and even with some of the smart people that you've talked to, can technology be applied to maybe helping us deal with uncertainty better?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going in a different direction there. I don't know of any apps that actually train you to be more tolerant of uncertainty.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about apps. I'm just, in general, you know what I mean? People that talk a lot about, scenario modeling, or artificial intelligence helping us consider different options or stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say at the moment, the technologies that most people actually are more and more connected with, especially during the pandemic, are ones that actually make us less tolerant of uncertainty, that train us in sort of the opposite ways. I mean, the jury is in, the research now shows that people who are hyper multitaskers have, less memory, they have less focus, but they also have their long-term detrimental effects on the way they think. Right. And, that also, and there are studies, they're just beginning to show that especially young people who are particularly socially connected on social media all the time are less tolerant of uncertainty. So this is something that, the scientists are studying right now actively, that the idea, if you think about it, the idea of dealing with the suspense and discomfort of having to deal with the more difficult math problem when you're doing your homework, or the space in which you need to do that third draft to the client memo, the one that's really going to seal the deal. Right. That all is hanging out, as we were talking about, in the space. It's a different tempo, it's slower, it's a different space because it's not outcome oriented, as we, as people want all the time. And then it's also, enabling you to instigate that higher order mind, that higher order thinking that's going to get you to the better answer. So uncertainty is woven into all of these better outcomes, but slower and more demanding. And yet, what are we surrounded with? A technology where even to wait to boot up, your computer, for microseconds is considered anathema. People don't go past the first page of their Google search results, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Brevity, quick speed. Again, it's what seems to me to be happening is that this quick mind, now that's the opposite of the reflective, slow thinking that Kahneman outlines, the quick mind that he also wrote about, the heuristic mind, the shortcut mind, which which really is predicated upon reacting to, upon patterns of old behavior. You're trotting out these heuristics, your biases, etc. All of that goes hand in hand with the way technology operates. So what are the technologies basically kind of stroking in us or grooming in us is to stay on that side of ourselves.
Exactly.
And just, we're not practiced very well in the slowness. Exactly. And I think if you can actually give uncertainty a shot, so to speak, if you can begin to see these extraordinary benefits, then you can actually and move onto a higher plane, it's like putting on the right jogging shoes when you're going jogging down the street. If you
Sure.
can put on uncertainty, get into it, not run away from it, wow, you're suddenly going to be moving faster, although, in a more reflective way.
Well, that's just it. You're kind of taking precautions, you know what I mean? And you're going in with perhaps alternate points of view, and you're going in with that reflection, you know what I mean? That perhaps you didn't allow yourself before, or that again, I'm going to come back to culture. That culture really didn't permit, you know,
Right.
which is why this is great. This is ambitious, and in a best case scenario, more organizations, more senior level leaders will be adopting and embracing this type of approach. But I guess there's a hill to climb to get over that. How much of this is lately? Let's talk last year and COVID-19. How much of this, at least even for you personally, or as it impacts the work that you're doing on the book, on uncertainty, was driven by even perhaps initiated or COVID-19 acted as kind of like a catalyst?
Well, actually, no, it didn't catalyze any of I was working on this book for a couple of years, even before the pandemic.
Mhm.
I can see these trends already playing out. Maybe COVID, basically put a label on, or sort of is the poster child for uncertainty.
Mhm.
But I think that we could already begin to see the sort of downsides of this, veneration of quickness and sureness. The idea that people are burnt out, that people don't feel like they're thinking well, that people are distracted, and all of those sorts of things. I could see that that the writing has been on the wall, and now COVID does put uncertainty in it's like the Hollywood sign. It's right in the bright lights,
Sure.
basically. But I think that, basically the research was already beginning to be, exploding on this topic beforehand, and the science was, is coming to the forefront. And that is because, basically in so many, for instance, medicine. I wrote about medicine, and I've done quite a bit of research into certainty in the medical field. And we talked a little bit about how patients don't really want doctors, although there's certain times when doctors can express uncertainty in various ways in which patients do feel comfortable about that. But the medical field is going through this huge soul searching, and that's compounded by the pandemic. That because they just didn't know what was happening with the virus a year ago, and they really and the certainty, the rush to judgment. Many people in the medical profession are beginning to question that, and to say that doctors, and in one study that I highlighted in the Boston Globe article, their Maine medical school began training their residents, their young doctors, in tolerating uncertainty, in understanding that there might not be just one right way to treat the patient. Simple as that sounds. From that training, the residents became more flexible, better diagnosticians, et cetera, proven results. And yet it's very hard, as one young doctor said, to say out loud, I don't know, or
Exactly.
I might have to look that up.
Exactly.
So there's a lesson for us all. And you're right. COVID brings us to the front, but I think it's all around us already.
Well, it's good. I guess in hearing your answer to that question, it's kind of neat because you were already headed down the path of looking at how we think about uncertainty, and this almost acted as sort of like a case study for you. Just to wrap up here really quick, I will put a link in the show notes on this particular program to the Boston Globe article. Aside from looking at that article, what where else could you point people or tell people to go if they want to find out more about uncertainty?
Um, mm,
Or does everybody have to wait for the book?
I think, yeah, I mean, there isn't a lot out there that isn't highly scientific or again, that sort of probabilistic, we can tackle it and make profits out of it sort of understanding. That's a whole nother order of business.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertainty itself, the psychology of uncertainty for, the normal person, it hasn't really been written yet.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting times.
Exactly. Maggie, I really appreciate this extra long conversation and your patience with me as a novice kind of getting through this. This is a fascinating topic, and I'm glad the article is getting an awful lot of traction out there for you. And obviously, everyone I know watching this will be looking forward to the book. All right?
Thank you. Great. Been a pleasure.
Thank you.